All right, Brett. Uh, we've known each other for a long time, but still,
Yeah.
can you like introduce yourself for the audience?
Well, happy to. I am Brett Hayes. I'm a physical therapist by trade, but I am the vice president of the Sports Medicine Institute for U of L Health, University of Louisville Athletics, and campus to a certain degree. We're trying really hard to integrate everything.
Nice, nice. All right, so uh, the main reason I want to have you is at Louisville, you guys use Dari, right? And I know like NFL, they're gonna try to have every team have Dari before 2028.
Mhm.
And I know NBA are doing this biomechanics lab, motion capture whatsoever. Major League are doing this, Major League Baseball, hockey are doing the same thing. So, and you, if I'm remembering correct, you are like one of the first that implement Dari motion capture when you guys at Missouri. Am I correct?
Yeah, we were the beta testers out there. So this is back in 2012 when the system first got introduced to me, and it was right after I took up charge. I was the senior director of rehab services out there, and we had purchased the system at the behest of Dr. Jim Stannard, who is our chair at the Missouri Orthopedic Institute. He was sold on it based on having a really solid vision of really just being a bit more proactive with our athletes. Um, it was a little clunky for a while. I mean, being the beta game, you're just trying to bring it together. But it was great because we were able to pretty much develop it the way we wanted to and create a system. Get down there. Lay down. Sorry.
You
Hope
good?
that hope we can edit that out. We were trying to get a system that we could create that was really evolved more in the medical space. I think it was something they didn't think about. They were really just looking at performance. But as time has evolved, I think its application in both has gotten really solid.
Hmm. So, uh, I've talked to a, a few biomechanists with Major League Baseball team, with hockey team, and think with some biomechanics lab and some research. And what they've been saying is like the motion capture, either like whatever technology right now, is really good at tracking sagittal plane. It's not so good at tracking frontal plane. Like it's almost impossible to track transverse plane movement. So if that's the case, like what's the point of implementing this technology?
Interesting. I don't think that is the case. I'm really surprised to hear that. Although a lot of people looking, I think, at mocap technology now are looking at a lot of the phone applications, things that are easily translatable through, iPads, iPhone, etc. Um, if you really want to do this right, you can't go there. You're right, because you get in that 2D motion, and there's really nothing you can extrapolate in multiple planes. The Darby system doesn't work that way. It is one that is a three-dimensional product. We can see rotational mobility in the thoracic spine in that transverse plane, frontal movements, rotations. We Yeah, I'm interested to hear how some of those people come up with that. But that's true. It's if it is, you're looking at more 2D environments and more practical applications because your phone you can take anywhere with you. Unfortunately, in this case, we need a lab, and um, even though they've tried really hard to make the Dari motion capture system one you can take into different areas, boy, the setup and takedown isn't ain't happening. At least not for me. So
So
I
yeah,
hear it. Mhm.
so talk to me about like this the setting because I know you guys take not like when me and Adam was there like you we built a Dari motion capture in the weight room. So talk to
Right.
me about the setting.
Yeah, the setting nowadays, the setting's pretty malleable. I mean, they can put it like we did in the weight room there, mounting the cameras in different areas. Um, In the other settings, in our sports science lab, we actually have it in a girder type situation, which is similar in our rehab clinic. We're very, very unique to have three separate motion capture systems. And we know that, but that's some of the benefits of being the guy who helped beta test some of this stuff. They know that we'll use it and apply it. And so, but it can be now set up anywhere. They haven't gotten to the point. I mean, it used to be a time, boy, back in the day, you needed a reflective coating box in all dimensions. You had to have these red lights that reflected off of it. And gosh, if we didn't, then when it evolved, if we didn't have a very solid green back, it would collapse again. But now it's gotten really good. I think when you're searching out mocap systems, that's really the key. It's a fine line between practicality and its usability, and then usability. You know, at the end of the day, because there's some much more advanced systems that use the diodes and those types of things, but those are hard to set up. I mean, it takes 45 minutes for one athlete, and in that time, I can crack off five or six, and get a report structure. A lot of the mocap systems just really assume that all clinicians, strength coach, go down the list, are just really adept at looking at a graph and translating that into something usable, and it's really not the truth. That's a whole nother analysis level that you have to have specialists with. The reason I've gotten so close into Dari is because the reporting structure allows me to look at a glance at a whole flight of joint vulnerabilities that I can put an athlete on the table right away and go, I got it, let's do this, and boom, you've got an implementation strategy. I think when you look at some of the other big labs out there that are bringing in all the stuff, and I love it because it is much more acute with, force plate measurements and all that type of stuff, ground reaction forces, accuracies. It doesn't give you anything usable immediately, and it's very hard for somebody. You have to have your lab statistician break it down and deliver it. So, I mean, it's become very versatile, not as versatile as a phone, but probably more versatile than your traditional high-end biomechanics lab. And I think us usability clinicians that want immediate application, this works. But then again, Eric, I'm an old man, so maybe I'm just not that flexible anymore, but it works for me.
So, do you guys have to because obviously like the Dart motion system, the report was built before I was there. So is the report do you have to talk to them about like the way you want to build the report?
You don't. You can really get the ones that they have that are native and that uses their own proprietary algorithms. So there's a lot of things that I couldn't even share with you if I understood it, which I don't. But when you get to somebody like when we worked with Adam Petway, he had very specific things he wanted to look at. So they will tailor make it for you, but then the reporting is also tailor made and it falls outside the algorithm. So it changes it, and you're going to have to actually look at it then as more of a biomechanical clinician and break it down yourself to get the data you want. But yeah, it was never meant to be like a sports specific system. It was meant to be an athletic development system. So we could see generalized performance in all planes. And that's why I like it, especially because when you start looking at different athletes, and that's our luxury, we get to see baseball players and basketball players. It's amazing how inconsistent their performances are and how things seem to loop into certain categories. Like, man, give me basketball players, and almost every darn one of them's got some kind of subtalar restriction. It's just not moving. They can't dorsiflex worth a darn. And then when you get your hands on them, you can see there's very little mid joint motion and those types of things. And whereas, you get more into some of your football players or multi-plane shorter athletes, and those aren't as existent. They're more up in the SI joint and hip related. And so that kind of gets exciting when you start breaking that down, because then you start going, oh, well, I know what I got to work on when I go into this gym, when I got to go into this gym. But Here's the thing that us clinicians that intervene with these athletes need to be sure of is you don't go in there and try to fix every darn thing, because some of these biomechanical inefficiencies or even vulnerabilities could be what's making them the great athlete they are. And so that's the part about any mocap system, right? Don't It tells you the what, it does not tell you the why, and it does not tell you what you should do. We're always going to have to be clinicians. That's why I've been trying to, when I talk to these companies and they're trying to do things to make theirs more usable, they're trying to plug in more AI based learning models so it can just spit out something that tells you exactly what to do. And unless it can download a lot of clinical brains, I don't want them to do that. I want them to just, all right, leave it up for us as clinicians to get around a table and discuss it.
Nice. I love this. I love this. Cause uh I remember like I don't know if you remember this or not, but like when we worked together, I remember like there's one time there's an athlete that he was coming back from an ACL injury and the way he changed the direction, just kind of weird to me. Then I
Mm-hmm.
film it, I show it to you, and you go to the audio motion capture the report and find like where is the problem and fix it. We fix it, right?
Yeah.
And this like I think that experience was like so good. So ever since I left there and I try to like work with other like clinician or other motion capture whatsoever, it's just hard to like it's hard to get someone to understand like encore movement and combine it with a table and motion capture, if that makes sense.
Well, I think yeah, and I do remember that, Eric, and that was really fun. I love those application lessons and everything. And even though I'm more of an administrator now, those are the times I get still the most excited. I think, really what you're looking at is as long as motion capture's been around, okay, it's only really been around in its computerized non-application version, right? They've got this great biomechanist, and that's what they do. They're right there with their computer and they're measuring patients, athletes, whatever when they come in. But there's no real consideration for true application. Like they're just doing what they're supposed to do, measuring movement, looking at it, dissecting it, which after a while gets me a little, forget it. It's just too much. But what is now really new, and we have a new system that we've created that we call corrective biomechanics. And it's a department that's all right. We're all physical therapists, although it's not limited to that. We have our strength coaches and our athletic trainers learning. But as they're involved in it, they need to know enough about the motion capture to understand not just how to read it, but how to directly apply it, and more importantly, when not to apply it. So, what you hit me with was great because you showed me what you were recording and you were seeing a mechanical change. And this is in that post rehab time, right? Which honestly is the right time to actually do a Dari. We tried to apply Dari like early in like post operative situations, and it makes no sense because you don't know at that point how their overall global biomechanics are actually going to change until they're really close to return to play, or at least much closer. When we got to see that kid, that's where we were together because he was about the time. It's like, all right, now it's time to get the Dari numbers and what's going on and see how it compares to the very first time we did it before he had an injury. Now, we didn't do that with this guy because we didn't have that data yet. We're now at the point where we're baselining all of our athletes. So not only do we know what to do to progress them from a corrective biomechanics standpoint, but if something goes wrong, they end up blowing that ACL, we've got a global biomechanical picture that we know they have to get back to before they really should play. You know, I had to, it's funny that you kind of bring that up because I had to bring that up with my team as I was teaching them when the application was appropriate for what we were doing. And I told them, if you're going to be a physical therapist working with athletics, you better be able to remove different hats. You cannot work on an athlete full in on rehabilitation and full in on corrective biomechanics at the same time. At least you shouldn't. There's plenty of clinicians that say, "Oh yeah, I can do it all." Yeah, no, you can't. You're putting way too much into it. When we are working on rehabilitation, we are keeping an eye, for instance, on a fresh ACL, going through its inflammatory changes, looking at its scar tissue adhesions, what's happening there, range of motion. We're focused on the joint, which is what you should be when you're in that early rehab stage. If you're trying to focus on the entire biomechanical picture, A, you can't look at it all. B, it's going to change every day as that knee heals. So I have to tell my clinicians, guys, yes, you have to do both, but don't try to do it at the same time. There's now, Eric, so much more philosophical reasoning behind using corrective biomechanics and any kind of motion capture system. In fact, motion capture at its highest availability is still just a tool. It's no different than the goniometer at the end of the day, except for it's pretty damn expensive. So it's really all that type of stuff. If you try to make it your end all be all, I don't care what AI you plug into it, you're missing it. Don't go there.
Yeah, because uh apparently like a lot of organizations are trying to hire biomechanics engineering, and I think a lot of them are still like they don't really have a system yet, which like we talk about like the system you built, like when I show you what I saw on the court, you're able to like figure out or pinpoint like what is this athlete need to work on, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I what I what I like encounter in like a lot of like biomechanics lab or like talk to a lot of different organization, what they're still doing is like, all right, this guy's complaining about knee pain. All right, let's just even with the biomechanics lab, let's just focus on the knee. I'm like, nah, that's not gonna work.
It's not going to work.
So
No. And
how do you build the system at the first place? How do you build your system to specifically athletic population?
yeah, well, I got to give Dari a lot of credit. Um, because they built it based on the algorithms. That being said, they didn't know what we knew at the time. And I think the way we came at the same interface, they finally got it to the point where it had a usable report structure that was interpretable by the user. Okay. That's when it kind of split. Then the user is very important on who you are, well, like you alluded to, employing. If you're going to bring in a computer generation biomechanist, okay, but they better be able to communicate very well with the clinician and understand their world. I mean, I'm not a strength coach, I'm a physical therapist. The line gets blurry in certain areas, but by and large, with programming, absolutely not. I want my strength coaches really being the best at that. I need to instruct them how to implement biomechanical changes to ensure that they're not only just safer, but they're more efficient and they're reaching the goals you want them to reach. Dari's still a tool for that. If I step out and there's a biomechanist there, and that's what he's doing. Oh yeah, look at his foot's doing this, his leg's not doing that, his spine's not doing this. And the strength coach goes, okay, so what should I do for my athlete? And the biomechanist, in a lot of cases, or the engineer goes, I don't know. I'm just telling you what the picture showed, you know. So now that's how it was in the old days, in the beginnings of motion capture. And I think you're starting to see, unfortunately, now that the technology's become more mainstream and it's going to enter up into these areas, these programs are going to do what you just said. They're going to hire engineers or those that don't have the applied science. And they're just going to go in there and pretty much tell you, yep, that's what the system's showing you, but there's no course. And so maybe that's the unique part of what we have done and brought to the table is that we're going, no, no, no. It's a tool. Just understand the tool, but more importantly, understand what you have to do with the tool to reach the goal of the athlete. Otherwise, you're just talking. Oh, look at that. I ain't even moving right. Yeah, that's too bad. It's not going there. And then all of a sudden, everybody looks at each other like, well, okay, now what do we do? That's That happens so many times. And there's a lot of college programs that have DARI that all they're doing is collecting data. And there are reams of it and volumes of it. And most of the athletes will tell you, "Oh yeah, I went into that machine once. I don't know what they did with it." And I tell you, our athletes see it. We give them the reports, and that's the really some of the more important parts of this is because you're giving an athlete some validity to what they're probably sensing. Now, stick with me on this because it can fire some people up. You get some, clinicians that, they're very good and they can break you down visually. And I'm decent at that, always was. I don't need DARI. We don't need DARI. But when we look at these things, we all have a different set of eyes. All right. And I've said this straight up, give me an athlete and 10 clinicians in a room, you're going to get 10 different responses on what's wrong with that athlete. Well, the athlete knows that. All right. And so not only does that mean that your opinion's just an opinion, they're going to look at other opinions and see which one they choose and they like. And at the end of the day, you don't have credibility. I don't care if you are Yoda of motion capture, right? Or just looking at somebody, you don't have cred with that athlete if they don't like what they're hearing. DARI, on the other hand, is the old proverbial the eye in the sky does not lie. I'm not telling the athlete what their problems are. They are telling themselves what the problems are through their performance in the system. And what's great is they can look at it. And I encourage everybody, man, really sit down with your athletes and share it because that is where they will get bought into whatever programming you give them because they're going to see it, validate it because they did it, and then follow what you're doing. And so that has been as much of an important part of high tech motion capture as anything, whatever, So sometimes you can almost go off book for what the DARI is seeing as long as the athlete sees what it needs to see to get to the next level. And I tell you, there's just so much more you can talk about with this other than just the tech and the measurement itself.
Yeah. So, since you work with high level athletes and for a long time actually,
Yeah.
and you're really good like when we were there, you're really good at checking scoliosis, pelvis obliquity, or their ankle, like you mentioned, like subtalar joint,
Mhm.
calcaneus metatarsal joint, or the SI joint. So, all right, here's a question. Is 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 this like really is these motion capture really can track these small joints how they move?
Yes, to a certain, I mean, nothing's perfect, you know. However, because of the acuity of the way this system particularly is able to algorithmically see in all different planes of motion, different angles, it can see some of those arthrokinematic motions. So the rolls, the glides, the slides. It can only go so far as to larger joints, ones that have a very clear articulation. You start getting anywhere distal to subtalar, phalangeal, those types of things, it can't see it. It's there's not enough articulating, although they could probably get there, but it's a heavy lift from a workload standpoint. And right now, the demand really isn't there. It's not like somebody wants to know, is your CMC joint rolling and gliding correctly on your, proximal phalanx? Is everything sliding the way it should? We don't care that much. So, but yeah, this system's been very good at it. You have to get also good at some troubleshooting. Actually, any motion capture system, you got to get good at it. If you're using diodes and things like that, they can fall off. If you're trying to do longitudinal studies and they got a diode on them, maybe they gain 60 pounds of muscle, and all of a sudden the diode really isn't the same place it was from the first capture because there's a whole lot more quad going on there, you know. Or in the cases with some of our systems, if they're wearing a piece of clothing that isn't quite tight enough, too loose, the dark contrast, you'll see the avatar, fall apart. So a lot of times you have to be really cognizant, which is tough when you're doing the captures. You got to be able to be pretty quick with that. And that's why it's always good to have a team of two or three, because somebody that's always watching the avatar will see when it flutters. And if it flutters and goes up, well, do it again, and let's make sure we got everything right. But by and large, we're pretty happy with the reliability of the measures we go through. And if something, that's the cool part, we all get together and look at these DARI reports together. Physical therapist, strength coach, athletic trainer, nutritionist. We're all kind of looking at these and we're breaking it down. We're all talking and pointing at things we see. It's actually such a great learning environment and a team building environment. But somebody will say, no, that's not right. That athlete doesn't move like that. I'm with them 24/7, which they sometimes almost are. And if it's a convincing enough argument, we'll go back to the tape, because that's the cool thing. We can go back to the terminal, look at the actual video that's captured, and sometimes they're right. It's like, oh, look, it didn't, it fell out of favor on that one capture. Or sometimes, there's a thing we call the gas factor on these things. If their explosive scores, athletic scores are low at gas, I call it the give a shit factor. If the athlete just doesn't care, it'll show up. You can see it's like, wow, they had 110, on their explosive. They're off the charts on their first test, but today they got 65. There's been no injuries. They're not even that tired. Come on, man, get back in the box, do it again. So that's the best part. And again, tells you why it's a tool. It's not an end all be all. You have to interpret. You still have to be clinicians. You still have to be performance specialists, and you have to ask those harder questions.
This is really awesome because I do feel like I think the main reason that you don't really encounter a problem with the motion capture is you're actually a really experienced clinician.
Mm-hmm.
You already have a lot of experience with injury. You already have a lot of experience with uh foot ankle scoliosis. So because before I even use the DART system, we already have like conversation about like scoliosis whatsoever. Like you know what you're talking, you know what you're doing.
Like, I know where you're going with it, and you're right. I mean, for those that don't have, that acumen, or just, I mean, yeah, I've been doing this 30 years. I have my hands on people. So for me, it's easy to see what the Dari's trying to look at, and my own personal muscle memory goes, oh yeah, because it makes sense for when I'm blah 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 blah. But I think that's why it's important who you bring in to run these systems. What do they know? Can they, like, if you're going to interview anybody to come in and be part of your biomechanical, ask them not just the questions about what they see, but what would they do with the information? How would they teach somebody to use that information? But I'm not going to go so far as to say, oh, it has to be a physical therapist, has to be an athletic trainer, has to be this. I don't agree with that. One thing I've learned over the years is that it really is about the person. I didn't go into this hardcore biomechanical training, man. I just had so many reps with so many bodies, and it was inherent to me. I could understand these things, and not everybody's geared that way, and so you got to spend that time. I worry a lot, especially in the pro realm. Although in collegiate, we're becoming more and more pro. Is that you're trying to buy things without really understanding how is it to really integrate, you know? And like Dari, for instance, I know in the NBA, they all have access to this machine, but that was almost a league decision, right? And without a very good indoctrination of the technology from someone, at least in my perspective, and Dari doesn't even know this. I'm arguing with them all the time about, you really don't know what people need, do you? And sometimes, well, yeah, they need to look at the athlete and see. No, they need to intervene. They need to react to what they're showing. Can you tell them how to do that? And of course, they don't have a physical therapist on their staff like me, so I'm trying to fill that gap for them. But I think that that's a huge part. Guys like us that understand it, it's not that hard to teach it once you get in there. But then, Eric, I want to teach you, well, here's what I would do with this athlete from a manual standpoint. You're like, well, I don't have manual skills. That line's getting blurrier every year because we got implements now and they're tools you're using. Even something as simple as a foam roller can really carry a lot of myofascial release, weight like crazy. And I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I can show you where to stick your elbow, when something is locked up and it's causing a mechanical change and it just needs to be released so they can perform right. Some of the therapeutic purists say, well, it's manual therapy, you're crossing over the line. Whatever. Lately, these days, you're seeing more stretch clinics come up that are run by strength. Well, they got their hands on people too. And granted, there's a lot of people in my profession that are going to argue it, fight it, da da da. I think that the thing that really is going to come down to it as the years go on, it's going to be responsibility based. In other words, you do something with your hands, Eric, that you're not trained to do, and something goes wrong, it's going to be your butt. And congratulations on getting sued. So it's really going to come down to that comfort level. And I hope responsibility. Again, hire the right people. You don't worry too much about that. But I think the bigger challenge in the pros, and it's valid, and I'm trying to even work around it myself, is that even with player associations holding the locks on what is shareable to the organization, the athlete's like, I still don't trust it. I don't want this data used against me in a contract, and hard to argue that, but a lot of people that have access to it, even when you got the best strength conditioning team in the planet, the athlete's going, I'm going in that thing. And so I think there has to be a real concerted effort by the players associations to almost, get in trouble for saying this too, hire the health and performance staff for these organizations and not let it be owned by the organizations. Otherwise, these athletes, and you're seeing it, they're going outside. I mean, for a year, or at least a summer and a half, I was personal PT for an NBA athlete I probably shouldn't name, but nonetheless, I wasn't part of the organization. I was in it for the athlete. And yeah, I put him into the Dari. I did all the things that I wanted to do. And he felt 100% comfortable because he knows that I ain't talking to the organization. I mean, he's with the Lakers at the time. It's like I had no desire to let them know what I was doing, only to say he's ready to play. So that's a lot of philosophical mumbo jumbo, but it's stuff we got to keep our eye on. Like, all right, you got the technology. Can you really use it? All right, fair question. Let's work that out.
Nice. Talk to me about hiring the right people. Because when you're with Pat at Missouri, you guys you guys hired Andrew Paul, right?
Yeah,
And then when you and Pat moved to Louisville, you guys hired Adam Petway, right?
yeah.
So te these two big names, they're like Andrew Paul and Adam Petway are like the best in our field. So talk to
Uh,
me about like hiring the right people.
well, some of it is just you got lucky. Um, I do believe, though, you do have to have a couple of heads, several heads together. I mean, geez, we've got Ernie Reimer here too. I mean, we got some of the most brilliant minds in the business. And
Yeah,
really,
Brian Mann was with you guys at Missouri.
yeah. And we're at Louisville. I mean, I'll be straight up. We're not Michigan. We're not Alabama. We shouldn't be attracting this kind of talent. I think it really has to do with doing your homework. At Dr. Ivy, when he's out like on all his tours and doing all these presentations, man, he's interviewing. You know, if you're speaking on a stage at any of these conferences, from my visual standpoint, his and Ernie, you're being interviewed, and we recruit. But sometimes you'll just take the energy, the willingness to learn with enough acumen to be dangerous so you can develop them the way you want to develop them. Ironically, your biggest threat isn't the employee that doesn't know what the heck they're doing. It's the one who thinks they got it all figured out because they're going to go rogue. They're going to do things their own way. they're really going to be more interested in them, maybe bringing a couple of disciples with them, but they will disrupt that culture more than anybody, you know. And maybe, just maybe, when Pat and I and everybody were interviewing people, we're seeing that. You can tell usually in an interview where someone's just selling themselves or trying to be the man, so to speak, where someone who is more engaged in that interview, really asking questions, really excited about what you're saying and what you're looking at, you can work with that. But you do kiss a lot of frogs. You think, oh, this is your princess right here. Boom. No, screw that one up. You're out of here. And we've done that, many times. So I wish I could say I have this magic recruiting philosophy, because we make mistakes too. But overall, man, you just gotta find them one that fits your culture and know that if they are coachable, you know, same way you pick your athletes, right? You can bring in an athlete, the super stud of the team. If you remember when you were here, we had a couple of those, but they were cancers in that club, you know. It's same thing happens in our world. In fact, the health and performance team of any elite sports organization ain't too far egocentrically away from those athletes, you know. And again, I think my biggest thing, like me, I'm a lifelong learner, man. I learn something from everybody, even the youngest, greenest clinician, or heck, even a front desk person. I'm learning. It's those ones that really sit up there on that perch and are talking smack, like they just know it all, they get it. They got nothing else to give, you know, because usually they still want to stay in control of the narrative. And man, I know when I'm getting too old. I was working with an athlete just yesterday, and I was struggling getting the SI joint. Honestly, another SI case, trying to get it where I wanted it. This thing isn't moving. I'm doing shotgun technique. And I actually had a clinician in my office. He's an athletic trainer who had done some PRI stuff, Posture Restoration Institute, which, to be honest with you, I kind of thought was, oh, this is kind of crazy, a little bit kooky, whatever. But because I'm that lifelong learner, I said, hey, man, help me out with this. Do that little transverse abdominis release thing you can do. I'll be damned if he didn't do exactly what I was trying to do, and his technique worked, mine didn't. And right then and there, I learned, man, I'm calling on him anytime I get a stuck thing. And then maybe, just maybe, I don't have to be the old school grip it and rip it clinician. Some subtle movements can actually correct some major joint dysfunctions. So if you're humble enough to see that, feel that, and give it up and work as a true team, I think that's the secret to what we're doing. And that's the secret to who you bring on board.
I like this because like when we are there, when me, Adam, Gio, Nate were there, like you guys would teach us a lot, but at the same time, like you let us develop as a strength coach, as a person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we are all pretty good, but like back then, like we're not that good. And you guys teach us a lot. You help us develop. And it's the same thing with, I feel like it's the same thing with when you guys have Andrew Paul, you let him develop. And when you guys have Brian Mann, you let him develop, right?
Yeah.
Same with
Yeah.
Adam, same with us. So talk to me about this, like how like I mean you're a leader. You're technically their boss. You're all our boss.
Mhm.
So talk to me about the mindset, like develop us and help us grow.
Oh, you know, that's a great, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because it's something that I consider what sets me apart as a leader. Because I learned years ago, and believe me, there was a time where I was a very self-centered clinician, right? Wanted to be the man, wanted to be everything. Everybody look at me. Brett's fixing the world. Um, but what I learned in no short way is that you can be that, but you're going to treat every athlete on the planet, you know? What is your real legacy? It's not who you fixed, it's who you taught that kept teaching and kept learning and kept growing. And so all of a sudden, like I never shot up to be a vice president, a chief, anything. That was never my goal. I was going to be a clinician on the sidelines the rest of my life, and I thought I'd be thrilled with it. A lot of this stuff is a calling. It just happens because you inherently see the better in others. You see the potential in others. And there's a switch that just goes off in your head one day where you go, man, I can sure take care of a lot more people by working with others to see the world the way I see it, to import your vision on somebody else. And I'm excited you got to experience that. And it was special because it's one of those things where you had all these cool guys. I mean, everybody that was there, you guys were all cool with Eric and G. I mean, I literally enjoyed going down there, not to talk to the players because sometimes they drove me crazy, but talking to you guys was fun, you know. And I remember that time you brought the video of what you were seeing, and I didn't see that until you acutely showed it to me, and I went, "Oh snap!" You know what? And then you and I put the pieces together. That is so much more exciting than if you gave me that video and I tried to poo-poo it. Oh, you ain't seeing nothing there. You know, thanks, but go away. I'll take care of this. And there's a lot of clinicians who'll do that. You know, that'll just because it's about them. It ain't about somebody else coming in. And if I could impart that wisdom to anybody, that has been how I have grown. You know, and it's funny working with people when you're developing them. They will respect you more as a leader than if you're trying to just order them around. You
Yeah.
know, you said that doesn't work with everybody though. I'm not going to say I've been 100% successful. I think the times I'm not though are usually when I got somebody who is about themselves, right? They don't want to be told by some old sage that this is how you do things or this is how we could do this together. They almost would rather be on their own. And I see that and I can tell that's not somebody I want working for me. You know, nope, nope. And I won't work with them. You know, I just won't. You know, it's like it's a waste of my time and it frustrates me. And so that's another thing, man. You can just tell when you're in a room of learners because they all just huddle together and they all start showing each other things and they're thirsty for it. They get excited when someone else figures something out because they all get it. Um, if you're not that as a leader, don't get into leadership. Please just don't. You make our lives
Yeah.
miserable. You create people who are not autonomous. You end up micromanaging them. They follow your cookbook, your recipe, and nothing grows. Nothing will grow that way because you won't, you won't harness their individuality in what they do, you know, and nor will they feel comfortable expressing their individuality. And it stagnates any organization.
Nice, nice. So, uh, apparently, like, although, like, I don't know about Andrew Paul, but like, apparently, like me, Adam, Gio, Nate, like, we still have our ego.
Yeah.
Adam, we still have our ego. We still have like, uh, like, we want to be the best, right? So
Yes.
we still have our ego. Like,
Yeah.
not to mention, like, we like to work each other, like, work with each other back then, but like. And like for so many years of being a leader, being like a leadership role, how do you manage that?
That's a great question. Because yeah, we all have an ego. If you didn't, you wouldn't be where you were. Okay. But I like to change it up a little bit and call it swagger. All right. You have a swagger about you. You exude confidence, you know, but you also have enough humility to know you don't know every freaking thing. And if you're willing to let that vulnerable side of you come across in your work working with others, you're probably going to keep your ego in check. All right. It's those who can't and want to argue out things and just want to disagree with you for the sake of disagreeing, you know, and you can pick them out. They're not hard, you know. Because when I get those, it'll kick my ego up. I'll say, listen, man, you have no idea what you're talking about. Do you know where I've been? You want to say that. But what I usually end up doing, and actually this is one of the best things you can do, I just kind of do one of these and all right, I'll let you run with that. And then I just bounce. You know what I mean? Silence says a lot more than that than argument because deep sign in their ego, they get a little ruffled themselves, like, oh, man, he just dissed me and he didn't even try to diss me. You know, does it always work? Not always. Sometimes you're gonna get that person knows what you're doing, and then it just this happens. You know, but again, it goes right back to the beginning of the personalities you bring to the table. Who do you hire? And I can't tell you how many times I just wondered, how did you get this job? you know, I'm like, I mean, you must have known somebody. And frankly, when you get into the pros, most of it is who knows somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and they get into a position. Heck, I even had a story back when I was in Seattle. It was decades ago, and I can tell this story because I'm pretty sure these team physicians are dead by now. But it was literally an orthopedic surgeon was in Los Angeles visiting his buddy, who was also an orthopedic surgeon and happened to be the team physician for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And a phone call comes through, and he answered, "Yeah." Oh, and it was a phone call from the front office of the newly formed, in the 70s, Seattle Mariners. He's talking, yeah, okay, well, yeah, I know a good specialist up there. Matter of fact, he's right here. Turns out his buddy practiced in Seattle. And he goes, "You want to be the team physician for the Seattle Mariners?" "Sure, sounds good." "Yeah, I got him for you. I'll send him your way." How he got it. And I can tell you back then, he was not a good doctor. I saw some bad outcomes. So that happens. I think it's getting better and better. But the thing is, the attention paid, I believe, these days to health and performance, at least in the collegiate sector, it's going to be hard to get the attention it needs because there's so much money now having to be diverted from all these athletic departments' coffers into the revenue sharing model. And they're going to look more and more for outside influences, which really is a pro model. And, a lot of organizations used to pay to be the team physician. Didn't mean they were good. They just used to pay for it. And the athletes figured it out. The agents figured it out. They found their own doctors. But I think that model's changing now. And you're starting to see definitely a balance of understanding, man, these athletes they're your franchise. They're your organization. They're everything. If they aren't protected well, what do you have? And we've been saying that for decades, but I think now it's going to become, at least I pray, that it's going to get better and some of the best true clinicians are going to end up in the roles they should be in. These organizations will hire the right people, and then, all right, we can make health and performance about just getting better, getting elite, and we don't have to worry about all the bad things that are happening.
Nice. All right, last question before I let you go. Uh, you've been in this industry for like what?
Too long.
Yeah, so
30,
long.
1994 is when I
Damn,
got physical therapy.
like
I know, right? To me,
30
it's just,
years.
yeah, seems like a week ago, but I hear you. Hmm.
So, so I don't know, like I don't know about like is dual credential a thing back then, but apparently like there's a lot more like organization, college, whatsoever want to hire a dual credential.
Yep.
And I guess my question is for those young practitioner out there, either as a strength coach, PT, like what would your advice for them if they want to be a strength coach in the college? Do you want Par 5 college role or a strength coach in pro setting or a PT in college or PT in pro setting?
Yeah. I think you know, and literally putting my bias aside as a PT, um, I've also been in this business so long and I see the changes that are happening. A lot of mistakes were made at trying to elevate professional degrees without really understanding the why behind it. Well, I know what the why was. More money, baby. Let's go to PTs need to be doctorates. I have a master's degree in physical therapy. I'm a grandfather on that, so I didn't have to go there. Athletic trainers, oh, you got to get your master's. Well, all of a sudden you got all these graduates with these horrendous college debts and everything, and then people are arguing, well, do I need my CSCS? Do I need that too? I think, dual credential, triple credential, CSCS, AT, PT, man, that's going to get you at the top of the resume pile. There's no doubt. No doubt. But it's, there's some people that come right out of school with all three. Doesn't mean they're good at anything, especially if they're green and have all these things. That just means they've been a professional student for a while. Until you got your hands on people, until you've maybe written a couple papers, until you can say, you've been there, done that. I don't know how good you are. I just don't. I don't really care about your title, quite frankly. To me, it's just like in our athletic development, man, it's reps. How many reps do you have? If you're a surgeon, how many ACLs have you done? Well, I've done 20,000. Well, man, I might let you cut my knee, you know. Physical therapist, how many patients have you seen? A couple 100,000, all of them in the athletic arena. Whoa, okay. When this kid just came out of school, has great knowledge. But if you don't have wisdom, you're just not there, you know. And so I think regardless of your education, man, don't go into an interview, at least with me, and spout that off. I figure I can look at that on your resume. What I want to see is, what does your wisdom tell you? You know, and what is it that you've done? Tell me some stories. Tell me some examples. What have you learned? Tell me when you really screwed up and how you dealt with it. That's a great question in an interview, because people like that, boy, some people like, I don't screw up, you know. You want to ask me that question? My answer is, you mean today or over the last week, or my whole life? We could be here all day. I don't think we learn much from our successes. We mostly only learn from our mistakes. And so I don't know, really. So asking that question, I think if you want to be differentiated from the pack, you're going to need those kinds of things. I worry about the athletic training profession. Schools are closing left and right. A lot of pro organizations are looking for PTATCs. I think if we really are being really practical, we take both those professions, we mash them together, we create something that is the comprehensive fit, in sports rehabilitation and acute management, because I knew I wanted to be a sports clinician. I didn't need to go and learn all my neurological stuff. I wasn't going to go work on strokes and spinal cord injuries. And so I think there's an awful lot that we should be just get over ourselves, put the professions together, make it easy for those of us who don't have the other to go back for a year, 18 months and get the other, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, but yeah, but get as many things to get yourself on that top resume.
Nice, nice. That's the last question I have for you today.
All right,
Thank
man. Well, Eric, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun talking about this stuff. I think you got more true honesty out of me than a lot of other ones where I'm trying to, but I think that's where I'm going to be going from here on out. I'm too old to hold back. I'll tell you what I think. But I enjoyed working with you when you're here, Eric. And actually, I'm really proud of you. I love seeing where you've been and where you're going. I hope you'll just keep taking me along with you on this journey.
thank you. Thank you.
All right, man.
All right.